and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the show where I have the opportunity to speak to some of the most successful and inspiring thought leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help educate, motivate, and inspire others to make the world a better place. Today, I am delighted to be joined by the completely awesome Dennis Ossipov-Grodsky. Dennis has got a global business level of experience with 20 years of entrepreneurial Fortune Top 30 and digital agency experience spanning 5 continents. He was also known as the King of Nuts in Ukraine for building a leading brand of nuts called Chaka in the 90s, immigrating to the US in 97, receiving an MBA from Georgetown University, and spending almost 10 years in Procter & Gamble, leading the $2 billion Tide global franchise. In 2014, Dennis met Gary Vaynerchuk and spent the next 4 years in the coolest digital agency in the world, VaynerMedia, and as SVP of Digital Strategy First and later as the head of Vayner Consulting, he left in 2018 to start Agile 5, a growth implementoring group that works with CEOs of mid-sized companies on unlocking their growth. Dennis lives in Princetown with his wife Julia, 2 kids, German Shepherd, and a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
I'm blushing. Are you talking about me, really?
I am talking about you. I'm talking about you and your Harley-Davidson. I absolutely love it.
Yes, thank you, Leila. My pleasure to be here on your podcast.
I'm delighted that you're here, and I can't wait to meet you in person as well, hopefully in New York next year. But tell me, for all of our listeners who I'm sure have heard of VaynerMedia, and indeed potentially yourself as well, obviously I've had the chance to be able to get to know you, and to make friends with you over the last couple of years. But tell us, what have you been up to recently? For all of our listeners who are tuning in today, what have you been up to recently? It all sounds incredibly exciting.
I think I am in a very special and exciting stage in my life right now because, as you said, I have been in business for many years. And what I have realized is that I have been incredibly lucky in my life because I had so many chances to acquire unique knowledge, get unique training from companies like Procter & Gamble, working on the highest levels, being an entrepreneur, meeting Gary and many other very special people who shared with me their knowledge, gave forward. And I think about 6 months ago, I realized that, it's time to give back. And I started consulting agency within VaynerMedia, and I was focusing on mid-sized companies. And I realized that what seems normal to me, what seems kind of commonsensical to me, is not for many great CEOs who did not have luxury of training that I received, the experiences that I had in my life. And that was the premise for starting Agile 5. And right now I have great honor of working with extremely driven, smart, beautiful people who are building their businesses. And I'm directing them, and I'm helping them identify what I call growth resistance points, because every company has them and they are different for every company. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm working with those CEOs of mid-sized companies.
I hope you don't mind me asking, but I'd like to just rewind the clock a little bit, just to talk a tiny little bit about you and some of the things that you did in kind of your earlier career, because obviously, you have got an exceptional level of experience working with, obviously entrepreneurs like the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, but also working with those blue chip businesses. And I think it's quite an unusual piece that you have there, that actually, you've worked for, some of the biggest brands in the world. Then you've also worked for these entrepreneurs. That takes some real doing. Very, very different types, I imagine, of cultures to be working in. Do you think there's anything kind of from, your earlier career that's almost like led you to this point?
I think everything happens in life for a reason. And I, again, happened to be in Ukraine when the country was going from communism to capitalistic society. And that's exactly when myself and my friends, we dove into business. And I think that start was absolutely paramount for everything that transpired after that, because when you make a move when you're 18 and you start your first company when you're 19, right? It removes a lot of barriers, mental barriers that many people still have. And I just removed them all. And when I moved to this country, to the US, which is my country right now, I just didn't pay attention to titles that people have. I was blissfully ignorant, and I was asking questions that many people for some reason were not asking, and I was making calls that people were not making. So let me give you an example. When I came to New York in 97, and then I went to a job fair, right? Regardless of the fact that I was running company in Ukraine, in the US, I was pretty much nobody. And I went to a job fair in Javits Center, which is this massive convention center. And I approached the McDonald's stand, and I started conversation in my, at that time, pretty broken English with the head of recruiting, and she somehow took liking in me, and she gave me a card for, at that time, CMO of McDonald's. And again, being bold and young, I just called that lady, and she was gracious enough to return my call, and we spent 45 minutes talking about what's possible, and extremely powerful experience for me, and allowed me to realize that I can do anything in this country.
What a lovely story. And you know what? I completely agree. You know, if you don't ask in life, then you don't get. And, you know, sometimes naivety is kind of a blessing, because actually, what's the worst that can happen? And that is such a perfect example of where actually you've just gone out there without necessarily even thinking about it too much. And all of a sudden, you know, you've got this opportunity, and you're building a relationship with someone who's actually very, very influential within one of the businesses that we all know worldwide. Incredible.
Absolutely, yes. And I continued in the same fashion, pretty much in every environment. I ask the questions that I think people are afraid to ask, and that's what makes me move.
I think that's really good advice. Being bold enough to ask those questions that maybe others are afraid to ask, but they're probably thinking them anyway. What is the harm in asking, hey? I mean, talk to me a little bit about some of the kind of the key pillars for you within leadership. I know that's a rather broad question, but I know that you've had, you know, kind of over 2 decades of management experience, and you're very, very keen, from what I understood when we last spoke, about actually the humanistic type side of things.
I'm a philosopher in my heart, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what I have observed is that many successful businessmen and businesswomen, business people, are philosophers in heart, because you need to understand, you need to uncover those patterns, right, that life is based upon. And one of them was, of course, I was pondering, how can I become a better manager for my teams? And I went from managing my small company in Ukraine with 10 people to managing almost 100 people in VaynerMedia. And always that question of, like, how can I motivate people? What really makes people tick? And I realized that over those 20 years, 3 things were transpiring for me. So first of all, the reason why people come to office is because of people. There were 2 places in my life where I saw this firsthand. I saw how greatly it can work. First was Procter & Gamble, because we had a very unique culture of growing from within. And then the second place was VaynerMedia with Gary Vaynerchuk, because he's absolutely unique human being, and he was able to create this environment where people could be themselves and were able to show their human side, became friends with each other. And that's what drives, this is factor number 1, in my opinion, that brings people into the office and opens up their best self. The second one is progress. And what I mean by this is personal progress. If I can see, if I as an employee, I can see that I grow as a professional, as a human being, because of my time that I'm spending in the office with my peers. That creates this vicious, if you wish, cycle of positive energy and reinforcement that we all need on daily basis, right? Mm-hmm. So progress is the second one. And the third one is, I'll say it, and I'm sure some people will cringe, it's pride. There are two types of pride. One is that results in hubris, and another one is a good pride based on pride for what you have done. The good that you've done, the beautiful commercial that you put together, the beautiful product that you launched that will improve many, many lives in the world. It's good to be proud, to feel proud for what you've done. I remember when we were living in Cincinnati, and at that time my son was 6 years old, and we went to the Kroger store, and we went to a laundry section, of course, right? And he was standing in front of that orange wall, and I remember how he asked, "Dad, which one is yours?" And I looked at that time, it was ice cold water, and said, like, "This one is mine." And it felt good. I didn't need to brag, but somehow it was important for him. It was important for me. We went on, right? We didn't have this conversation after that, but that feeling of pride, it was very powerful. It's still very powerful for when I talk about Tide, because it does have this something kind of, it became a source of energy for me. Not necessarily to boast, but to feel good.
I don't think that is boasting at all, and I certainly don't think it's cringy. I think the way that you describe it, and this is what I love about you, Dennis, is the way that you put emotion and passion into when you're speaking about things. I feel it. Someone said to me the other day, and it really kind of stuck with me. They said, people don't remember what you've said or what you've done, but they remember how you made them feel. And that really stuck with me. And that little story that you just told was just kind of so representative of that almost. I think that feeling of pride, who doesn't want to feel good about themselves and they've achieved something? If you're taking pride in your work, which clearly you do in abundance, that shows and it comes out. And ultimately in business, I guess it creates, much better products and more innovation and what have you.
Indeed. And I think I see in environments where, especially right now, where kind of millennial generation, they're willing to move fast, right? And sometimes that desire to move fast in young organizations is manifested by rapid progression from position to position. Essentially, not even from position to position, from title to title, right? From director to VP to SVP, et cetera, and without real substance. And I was thinking, like, why is it happening? And in my opinion, that was because there was not enough good reinforcement for the work that the kids were doing, the young men and women were doing, right? You do need to create an environment where they can go and say, like, this is my work and I'm so proud of it, and move on, right? And essentially shifting focus from titles, from the form, to the essence of what you're doing, to meritocracy, to the talent itself. And I think that's fundamentally what's driving, especially young organizations right now.
And it's really interesting, again, that you say this, because I do think that millennials and zillennials, and certainly, the future generations beyond that, are coming into a world where obviously social media and digital and everything like this is absolutely kind of prevalent, and that there is a huge amount of sense around these different areas of purpose and freedom of speech. So people are able, through the wonders of social media and the various platforms, even what we're speaking on now, able to get their voices out there and get their voices heard. To your point on the meritocracy piece, being able to shift shift focus from that title, as you said, to actually doing something good and actually having some purpose there. Because really, a title, like you say, it's nothing. It's something written on a piece of paper. It's how you feel. It's the purpose and the things that you feel you've achieved, really.
I love how you put it. Yes, that's exactly how it's not a title, it's how you feel about it, right? Beautifully done. Beautifully said.
And Just moving on to a couple of other pieces. I know that you've spoken to me before about IQ, EQ, and CQ. On the cultural intelligence side, you kind of, to me, seem quite an expert in this because you've gone from living in very, very different environment, of course, in Ukraine, coming from, as you very modestly said, coming from nothing to obviously being where you are. And I certainly didn't think you came from nothing at all. But I guess obviously that cultural intelligence piece, I know that's really, really important to you. Talk to me a little bit about the IQ, EQ, CQ pieces.
Yeah, it's again, this is a product of my experiences and going back to being absolutely lucky. And in my life, I had chance to travel to 50 countries, not just travel like in and out, but spending time in people's houses, doing laundry in India, in China, in Philippines, really feeling people and understanding them the way they are. Right now, until now, we have been talking mostly about IQ and EQ, especially EQ recently. The CQ, the way I put it, the cultural intelligence, right? It has not been broadly talked yet, but I think it's becoming more and more important because the world is getting smaller and smaller in a sense, right? And we are stepping on each other's toes globally, if you wish, in a good way and sometimes in precarious way. I think as a leader of organization of any size right now, you do have to be very culturally aware because even if you're a mid-sized company that produces products in China and Vietnam and then imports them to the US and other parts of the globe, you have to know how your suppliers think, what makes them feel good or not so good, right? And how can you help those people to become or be their best selves when they work with you? And unfortunately, I don't think it comes from reading books. You really need to push yourself. And I'm speaking right now to your younger audience. I really hope, guys, you can travel as much as you can and have as many experiences on the ground as you humanly can afford, because only then you will acquire this CQ, that is cultural intelligence, that will go a long way in your personal life and in your career.
That's a really, really nice way of putting it. And I have to say, I mean, whilst I absolutely love books, I'm a bit of a book nerd, to be honest with you. But there is no substitute for the feeling that you get when you smell, taste, touch another culture. I mean, you talk about these, incredible going to 50 countries. I think that's totally awesome. One of the best experiences I had, other than meeting my fiance actually, was going to India by myself. And I literally did the Golden Triangle, kind of backpacked, I suppose, around, literally got into a taxi with no wing mirrors and traveled the distance across Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, smelt, tasted, felt, spoke to the people. And that's an experience that I hold deep in my heart that frankly, I could never get from reading a book, fantastic as the book might be. So yes, in a long-winded way, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, you know what I used to do? I used to collect smells of new countries. I was waiting for that moment when the door of an airplane opens up and I do this first sniff. And what is it? And it can be sometimes the smell of coal, charcoal, right? It can be the smell of jungles, but that first impression, it still stays with me. So you're absolutely right. It's critical to be on the ground.
I love that. Every time I come off a plane now and smell the air, I'll be thinking of you, Dennis. I was thinking when you first said that, I was like, oh, how does he collect the smells? Does he take jam jars around and collect the smells and put the lids on? How does he do this?
Yeah, exactly. Remember that book, Parfumist, right? Parfumer, and who was collecting smells, right? Not the pretty story. All right, let's move on.
So moving on then, and I know we've kind of touched on a number of these points, but obviously the show is called Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, of which you are, one of those. And I think everyone is actually, to a degree, most definitely. But what does diversity and inclusion, or diverse and inclusive leadership, actually mean to you?
You know what? I know that those two terms can be charged sometimes, right? Diversity and inclusion, especially in the light of everything that's happening in our society right now. And all of those trends, some of them are good, some of them are not so good. But I think regardless of the word diversity or inclusion, what I have been always caring about is making sure that on my team, we are very self-aware of what is it that we have as professionals, as human beings, and then realizing what is it that we don't, and compensating consciously for what is it that we don't have. Because I truly believe that the sophistication, the depth of thinking comes from loading yourself or your team as a collective self with as many pieces of information and as many ways of looking at things as possible, right? Mm-hmm. And each human being is unique. Like you and I, we might be born in the same place. Our parents might be friends and they went to the same school, but that collection of instances that created Leila will be infinitely different from collection of instances that I'm constituted of. That creates a completely unique take on life. Frankly, when I look at every human being, I see a universe that walks, right? What's critical is to make sure that as a leader, you are able to identify what is it that you need to add to your team, right? And frequently, it comes from a very kind of obvious thing, men and women, right? Sexual diversity, racial diversity, cultural diversity, but it also comes with mental diversity. It comes with ability to see things differently. And for instance, right now I have privilege of working with one of the most prominent AI organizations. They had their roots in quantitative finance called World Quant. And what amazes me about those people is that, hey, those are the smartest people on the planet, right? Those are quant mathematicians. Wow. And yet what they realize is that in order for them to make their product the best in the world, they have to bring this diversity, and they have assembled a team of people not just from finance, the quantum analysts from finance. No, they brought data scientists from aerospace, from biology, oceanographers. Why? From different countries. Why? Because they need that diversity of thinking. Because a person who spent his life in finance might be thinking differently from a data scientist who spent her life as a astrophysicist. And that's what allows them to generate this incredible result that they were able to deliver over the last several years. So I think diversity is, compensating for what your team doesn't have.
Absolutely. And I think the piece around diversity of mind is so, so relevant, because actually, I know we're talking, philosophy before, but if you strip back all of the visual appearances and say the accents and everything like that we have, actually, we really are hearts and souls walking around. It's those differences of mindsets that really do make us unique. I love that quote that you said. I'm totally going to use that again. I definitely am going to put it in the show notes. People are universes that walk. I think that's just such a gorgeous way of kind of explaining things. I love it. So moving on then, I know this is a very big question and maybe it's a little bit cliche, but what is your secret to success? And what does that mean to you?
I think truly my secret is complete disregard for titles. And I mean, titles can be like titles, right? Like, oh, he's a president of this company. Or it can be importance that people sometimes, the air of importance that people sometimes try to project. So I don't have that fear of a title. I don't know, maybe I'm crippled in that way, but I always looked at people I was looking for their human side, for who they are, what they are, how smart, kind, loving they are. And that's what defined my behavior with them, never titles. So I hope your listeners can leverage this secret, right? But it might be some DNA deficiency. I don't know.
No, and I absolutely think that they will do. And so lucky that we've got some wonderful listeners from all different walks of life and different companies and, millennial and zillennial leaders as well. And I think, certainly that would resonate probably with everyone really. And especially, the millennial leaders who now, so many different statistics demonstrating it, often put purpose and humanity before profit. I think that is really, really key. Success is another thing that you could debate. What is success to a person might be perhaps a very different type of success to another person. It doesn't necessarily always mean lots of money and big job titles, like you say. Actually, the human side, how smart and kind and what have you a person is, actually, that's what they'll take with them. Beyond. Okay, and I also wanted to ask, what advice would you give to the younger Dennis, if you could give that now?
So I think, I don't believe in changing the past, because I'm very happy with who I am today. And the only way I could have gotten here is because of everything that happened to me, good or bad. But I think buying Apple stock and Amazon stock about 10 years ago, and starting doing yoga out of all things early in my life, that those two would have been advices, because yoga gave me an incredible kind of reshaped my understanding of my body, my how efficient it can be, how healthy it can be, and what kind of impact it can have on my mental state and success in life and business everywhere. So yeah, it's a little bit of advertising plug here for all you yoga instructors, but I absolutely think it's critical.
Oh, I love yoga, and Kundalini yoga as well. I think is fabulous. Which types of yoga do you do?
Ashtanga. I've been in Ashtanga for the last 17 years. And I'm balancing it with karate, like yin and yang, soft and hard, and it works.
Brilliant. And I think this is the great thing about business, actually, kind of more of the human side, is that businesses are really starting to embrace the health conscious side and actually making sure they're looking after employees. I was in with a couple of clients of mine last week, and they do kind of yoga lessons in the office. I think that's really, really cool, and actually taking the time out to heal your body, both mentally and physically, is absolutely critical, because really, if you're not recovered, then it's very difficult to get back up on the horse again and start focusing. Okay, so just a couple of quick last questions. I know we really are running out of time now, and I really want to kind of just summarize some of the key learning points for all of our listeners as well. But who's inspired you most throughout your career and indeed life? And have you got any particular favorite sheroes or heroes or books, authors, quotes, anyone that kind of really helped you along the way, or you've enjoyed reading their stuff?
Probably you can see from my previous answers that I'm constantly trying to be in the now, right? And I think
very Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the power of now.
Yeah,
Go,
the power of now. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, he was one of the influences of my life, truly. But I think in every moment, in every life stage, we do have very unique individuals or books that push us forward and that become very important for you in that specific moment in life. So for me, I really woke up when I was 13, 14, when I was reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy's books, right? That was important at that time. And then when I moved to the US, I remember my wife was in University of Pennsylvania at that time, and they have this beautiful bookstore. And I walked into that store literally on second day in the US. I walked in, and there is in golden letters on that wall, there was a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, so that you always have to strive to do things that you think you cannot do. And I'm not going to lie, but it's still, that quote is still with me always. And I even took a picture of it, and it's in my iPhone, always with me. And then was progression to Steve Jobs, right? And Gary Vaynerchuk right now. But I think if I look back at the last 5 years. So I absolutely adore and inspired by what Barack Obama has done for this country, for this world.
Absolutely.
What and his wife, by the way, I'm absolutely, he would not be able to do it without Michelle. And I adore this couple as human beings, as leaders. Elon Musk, for what he's doing right now to our civilization. I'm a huge sci-fi buff, and what he is doing is absolutely astonishing, and I completely agree with his philosophy. And RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for being this incredible powerhouse of humanity, humbleness, intellect, and force for justice in this country. And I'm sure it resonated throughout the globe. And so those three for me right now are the most kind of aspiring people. I absolutely must say that the common thread through my last 25 years was my wife, Julia Ossipov-Grodsky, who became my foundation and who saved me many times when I was in the dark places. And she continues to inspire me on a daily basis. So I'm grateful to her.
That's so lovely. What a nice...
Don't cry right now. Don't cry, right?
Oh, that's so nice. But you know, I'm glad that we're not on video, actually, because you would see a little tear in my eye. I think relationships like these are why life is worth living.
We're lucky, right? We're lucky to have them.
We're so lucky.
Yeah.
And there's lots of lucky people out there, as well, I'm sure, who've got fantastic relationships. And just to summarize quickly, because I know that you are going to have to pop off soon, I've learned a huge amount from this call. I believe every, conversation, every meeting, everything that you've said, has really, really resonated with me. And I'm sure that it has done as well for our listeners. To kind of surmise in essence, Eleanor Roosevelt said, always strive to do things that you cannot do. Take up yoga. We can't go back in time and buy Apple and Amazon stock, but maybe it's a good idea right now. I'm not sure. Definitely two fantastic brands. The piece about people being a universe in themselves that walk, I think that's fantastic. Really kind of embracing being your authentic self. And for everyone who's traveling right now and maybe listening even on the plane or wherever you might be, embrace those smells when you come off the plane. That is what culture and living is all about, really do. Hopefully everyone's taken something from this call. Don't be scared to push forward. Don't be scared to ask the things that other people haven't asked or you're thinking and want to say, because actually some of the best opportunities in life can come from that. Very, very thankful for you, Dennis, for sharing some of these really unique personal stories, which I'm sure all of our listeners will really thoroughly enjoy listening to.
Leila, thank you so much, my dear, for having me on this podcast. It's truly an honor, and it's a great pleasure always to have conversation with you. And when you're in New York, we'll definitely have our fire chat with wine and many more philosophical. We'll touch upon many more philosophical topics. Thank you.
I can't wait. That is the end of the show. This is Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast, with you every week. You've been listening to Leila McKenzie, and we were joined today by Dennis. If you would like to look up any of the pieces that were on today's show, any of the people and the quotes that Dennis has mentioned, I'm going to put those all on the show notes. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.